let's have our chat with Santander. We have also with us Matt Clausen from Parasoft, who's our Chief Marketing Officer, and there we have Kyle, and Kyle's and we call him an enthusiastic engineer. He loves learning, change, and innovation, and he's got some really fascinating ideas, and he's done some really cool things. So I'm going to let these two guys talk about service virtualization and virtual environments. Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks, Arthur. A couple of observations. One, DevOps has held promise for a long time, and we can see from the data that leading companies clearly make huge impact, right? But there's this big disparity still. And I think a lot of what we're going to talk about today is how do we remove that disparity? How do we enable organizations like Santander and others speaking, how they've enabled themselves to kind of really move into those leader ranks, and what are those key factors? And so one of them is automation, automated testing, right? He talked about how there exists this tie between being really good at DevOps, huge advantage in the market, and then your automated testing practices and where those are as well. So I don't think Santander is any exception whatsoever. In fact, I think that's what Kyle's here to talk about today. So welcome, Kyle. Thank you. And maybe you can start by giving the audience a quick introduction of yourself and a little bit of background on your role at Santander.
Yeah, sure. So a bit of my background. So I have been in the industry now for 10 years. My previous employer was Barclays Bank, where we did similar sort of stuff with service virtualization as well. So began in QA in my early career, then moved into the development realm, which just sort of give me the sort of best of both worlds, really, seeing points of view from the developers and then from QA as well at the same time. So I think that's been such an advantage, especially with pushing the service virtualization agenda, because from both perspectives, it's been very sort of positive and beneficial to both sort of parties. And I am now in Santander UK, which is a branch of Santander Group based in the UK. And I've been here now for a year and a half.
Okay, awesome. So maybe describe, when did you guys first engage Parasoft? But what was the primary challenge that Santander was facing? What were you trying to address within the organization? Talk a little bit about the problem space for a little bit that brought you to looking at a new type of solution.
So when we initially began in Santander, service virtualization didn't exist. Nobody even knew what the concept was. So my job was to change that, essentially. And then this is when we started engaging with the Parasoft team. And as you guys know as well, we've been very sort of like hit the ground running, as opposed to maybe other organizations, because we sort of knew what we wanted straight away. So we came across sort of the standard industrialized problem of, we've got these legacy mainframes, we want to run performance tests, but our infrastructure is too delicate to do this. We've got APIs that are being developed for Salesforce, which aren't ready yet. We've got AWS migration happening all at once, sort of thing. So Santander's aim was to sort of plug these gaps. And what we did initially is to get the business case together. Was we went across the whole of the UK, all of the product teams, so we call them product teams, and then we asked them, so every month, how much downtime do you have because of issues with data, mainframe, outages, this sort of stuff? And the average came to about 5 days per month. So this then was our target, to reduce this down drastically. And that was sort of our starting point. And this is when we engaged with Parasoft to say, right, we need to bring in a tool now that can plug in these gaps. We can bring stability to these lower environments, so we can get, out to our customers a lot faster. And ever since then, we've sort of took off with it, basically.
So would you say, I think Gene was describing a really interesting scenario where he made a pretty bold statement, which one huge failure is the inability to test independently. But I think maybe another way to think of it is to have an uninterrupted or no impediments in your way to test when and how you need to an environment, right? And I think it sounds like there's directly a correlation to the challenge you were facing with the mainframe, with your cloud, with some of your large applications like Salesforce. And so would you, I mean, maybe comment on that. Is that accurate? I mean, an accurate statement?
Yeah, I was going to say, so as Gene pointed out as well, testing and isolation is key, and you don't have the ability to do that in most environments, especially in banks. You've got complex scenarios, complex customers, with complex needs. We sort of serve customers anywhere from your average day personal customer all the way up to your wealth customers as well. So each customer is completely different. And in order to replicate them scenarios, we're talking, days, weeks, months of data, batch runs just to replicate it. We have to go into production, pull out the data, obfuscate it, and sort of completely decouple it from the actual customer scenarios, just so, the regulators know that the customer's data is safe within test as well. So yeah, I'd definitely say it's been key to achieving that, because we wouldn't have been able to do half the stuff that we've been able to do. I mean, a good sort of scenario is we've got our mortgages, which is part of one of the largest parts of the UK branch. And then straight away with them using SV, before they even used it for their regression and automation stuff, we got into the development stage because they're able to test scenarios they weren't previously able to test with erroneous data, because we don't always constrain a happy path, within test, it's sort of like sad path as well. And they're able to spot 9 defects prior to them even implementing it fully, just by them testing it locally, and that has stopped them defects getting into production potentially later on in life. And obviously that saved the impact from the customers and the reputation of the bank as well, because if they got into development in production, how many calls to the help desk is that? That's immeasurable sort of thing. The reputation of the bank is also immeasurable. Our customer's going to lose faith if these defects got leaked into production, sort of thing. So I think that's quite key with this.
Yeah. So maybe I think you mentioned something early on in this discussion that basically you had prior experience with service virtualization. So when you came in here, the goal stated, and you did backtrack to the challenges you were trying to solve with service virtualization. But maybe talk just briefly about that sort of the decision, process you went through at Santander around selecting a service virtualization solution. What was the criteria? Obviously, you had to build a business case. It sounds like it was based upon some of the research you mentioned. But talk a little bit about that process, maybe, and how you kind of came to making that decision.
Yeah, sure. So what we came to the conclusion of is one size doesn't fit all. So we came from, say, Barclays, and then we sort of tried to lift and shift what we did there. But we realized that Santander was at a different point, had different priorities, and the business was completely, although they're both banks, the priorities were completely different. So what we had to do is we had to adapt what we had at the time. So Santander's priority at the time was cloud. So moving into the sort of cloud priority realm. So what we had to do is go back to the drawing board. You've still got the industrialized method approach of service virtualization, replacing the legacy systems downstream, keeping the environment stabilized. But we've got like a new sort of problem here. We've got APIs brand new, we've got greenfield environments here, and what we need to do is we need virtual environments for other teams to consume, to use, to test, to create their test suites on, to create their performance tests on, prior to us even having the actual APIs built. So this is where we sort of innovated, and then with the Parasoft tool as well, we were able to achieve this innovation where we take the specifications, we create the virtualized services from the specifications, we get the synthetic data, inject these into the services, and then already before they've even started development, we have a virtual version of what the API is going to be. And from that, we can already start writing the tests on it. We could already starting the JMX for the performance test on it, sort of thing. So it's really enabled teams to have that sort of, we call it bank in a box model. So they've got all the bank's environments already prior in a box. So whoever can pick it up, they can shift it, and then they can just use and consume that environment, that virtual environment within the cloud space itself prior to anything even built. So there's no dependency on developers waiting for other developers to develop stuff, or third parties even. There's no dependencies on the testers to start writing the automation scripts because they're still waiting for the APIs to be developed. So we sort of speed everything up slightly by sort of achieving this. So this is where it was slightly different at Santander to Barclays.
Yeah. That's excellent. An excellent description. I think what intrigues me is clearly as you're describing this, you're looking at the unique needs. So if a diverse set of needs across the different teams. You're thinking about how do you, I think Gene was talking about daily work, making daily work easier, better, more efficient, right? Sort of like your daily work experience is critical. And I think you had that attitude. So a couple of things that struck me about the way you rolled this out is, one, how quickly you were able to roll it out, to scale it ultimately, and then achieve success. So two parts to this question. Part one is, talk a little bit more about what were the keys to success in, I mean, you talked about selecting the technology, that's fine, but what were the keys to success in actually rolling it out, making it successful, the adoption of this technology successful within the bank? And then let's talk, I want to dig in a little bit more to what was this, what was your actual success metrics? Let's talk about some numbers and like, what have you achieved? Have you validated that you indeed, you're getting the return on investment you wanted? So step one, like, how did you make this happen? How did you scale so quickly?
So yeah, I think a key to that was innovation and being agile with service virtualization. Not sticking to the industrialized method of coming in, go to the team, show them how to use the tool, and then expect them to build services, because they have got a day job. And this is what we really thought about of the innovation. So how can we integrate this into a sort of CI/CD pipeline where they don't have to do anything other than press a button? Because these teams are really busy with trying to push stuff, migrations into cloud. These teams have got work to do. They've got features to deliver to customers, like regulatory or new features for products within the bank itself. So what we wanted to do is sort of take that pressure off them and innovate, and then give them the tools and the capabilities by using the Parasoft tool itself to do these things sort of autonomously, as opposed to the old sort of method is we go in, we show the team how to use it, which again, in most cases it does work, but I think teams have really got to like have the time to do it, really have the time to adopt it, to do it. So if we can say, what's your most painful point at the minute, maybe pick like the top 2 pain points and then go after them. And what we do is we've got a federated model here in Santander. We've got a central team of SMEs. And then what we want to do is we want to pass on this knowledge. And we say to the teams, look, we don't want to be a blocker for you. We can build these services for you. However, we don't want to be a blocker. So we're going to show you how to use the tool. We're going to educate you on how to use the tool and how to create these services. We're going to look at the points. We're going to look at all the infrastructure, and we're going to tell you the best place of where to put service virtualization. Because one of the hardest points is to where's it going to go? Is it going to go right at the bottom, or do I just want to do UI testing? So I just want to plug everything behind our application sort of thing. So then them are the main points. And I think the way we've done it is we've gone into each feature team and we've customized this to each single one. And this is where we've been able to grow, because, for example, in the mortgages space, we started off with one mortgage team. Within our mortgages space, we've got multiple teams. We've got like, different types of mortgage servicing, mortgage payments, all this sort of teams. And then what we noticed is by helping that one team, it's passed through word of mouth. And the beauty of it is that these teams were able to reuse some of the existing services and think, oh, we can reuse this and this. And then other teams like mobile banking, they said, oh, we can also use this service as well. So they're seeing this catalog of services and they're able to reuse it. And then this is what sort of implemented the growth, because they're reusing it, but then they're adding their own sort of flavor on top of it. They're adding their own stuff and they're sharing these services amongst themselves. So I think, just starting off initially with, I think we started with 5 teams initially for the POC, and these teams are really successful now. And now we've grown to sort of, I'll get onto more metrics later, sort of like, 20 feature teams now using this. And I say a feature team, so one of these feature teams is a whole bank. So we class Cater Allen, Santander UK subsidiary, as a wealth bank. That's a whole feature team which are now using this sort of in anger to test their regression. But each one of these have got unique different scenarios from it. And it's sort of, after you get in there and get these initial pain points, it sort of sells itself within the organization. It's sort of self-expanding as a way. And we're just here then to support the more harder, the more technical, the new stuff that comes in sort of thing. And then we just need to ensure that we keep innovating to keep up with the times, essentially.
Yeah. So what are you, 5 years into this? No, right? Like what, less than a year, right?
Yeah. So we officially purchased the tool in April of this year, I believe. But from POC stage, it was October. So we've been doing this, slightly over a year. But from the actual purchase and actual implementation, it's been since April. But we've really, really grown since then. And obviously, we appreciate the help of you guys for, being there for us with our demanding sort of ways, because we really wanted to push this and make it successful and grow as fast as possible, essentially.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. So I mean, that's one of the things that struck me as we were talking and before this this event, and I heard you talk a couple other times. So how, I mean, look, at the very end, Gene said, "Hey," he boiled it down. Sounded like he kind of boiled it down to one thing, which was speed. I mean, if you're gonna have one metric in this day and age around DevOps, around app dev, right, with speed, it sounds like that was one of the challenges, right? You were talking about delays, you were talking about downtime, you were talking about measuring, reducing that. So what's the ROI? Like, let's cut through all the technical or the quality metrics that may or may not be as meaningful, but to a meaningful business metric, which is speed. So what are the results? I mean, what have you guys been able to achieve?
So the most meaningful metric to the business itself is we've seen on average, and I'll tell you how we've calculated this as well, a 40% efficiency saving minimum. The reason we came to this calculation is, so in Jira, we took 2 teams, 2 features. We tested one with service virtualization, one without service virtualization, and we measured the time it took for team A and team B to get from the backlog, from the backlog to in development, all the way to with customer. And what we noticed is, on average, we were seeing teams who use service virtualization and really leveraged power to get there 40% faster and more efficient, and they were on to the next project, the next feature, before the team that wasn't using service virtualization. And then we were able to add this into the amount of numbers of people that were using the tool itself. So I know now within Santander we've exceeded the 100 mark of users using the tool. And each one of them has their own sort of return on investment by using this tool itself. So we've exceeded our targets within the first year of what we wanted to achieve in efficiency savings than we did prior. And then some other sort of metrics that I'll sort of throw out there as well is within the past year, we've done over 6 million transaction hits onto our central server. So that's not including local or our AWS instances either, which is quite impressive because we did 1 million in a week about a couple of weeks ago as well. So we can see the growth is being substantial because we're running, huge performance tests against this now. We did our first ever production test with mortgages the other day, because we can't use their mainframe to do performance test because we share it. So instead of having to wait out of hours, we ran the performance test on the load and we got successful results out of that. We've got, coming up to over 100 virtual services created now, these including like mainframes, APIs, all sorts of stuff with thousands and thousands of data sets. I said we've got over 20 product teams onboarded, and these product teams can be anywhere from business banking to Cater Allen wealth banking. So they're not small teams. They're huge teams with, like, you know, probably 20 to 30 people in using this tool, sort of thing. So it's not sort of a small sort of team when we say these product teams. But yeah, we're quite impressed with the statistics, and then obviously it's getting a lot of attention from, you know, other parts of the bank as well, because they're like, wow, you know, it's really accelerated within the first year, sort of thing, where other places have really started to stall with it. You know, we've really sort of to exceed expectations within year one.
That's awesome. That's awesome. It's amazing. So we actually are out of time. However, I'd like to field one question. So if you have a question for Kyle, and by the way, this isn't the last you're going to hear from Kyle, so that's the good news. Also, he's going to be on a panel a little bit later. So Arthur's going to extract some more valuable information from him as well, and he'll be able to share some more. But if you do have a question, go ahead and put it into, go ahead and type it in now. And so I'm kind of scanning through here. Let's go with this question. I'm going to rephrase it slightly, but how has this solution contributed to the success of your cloud initiatives? Because you had mentioned that as one of your key business initiatives.
So I think it's been successful because it's allowed us to do things a lot faster. You know, we're not waiting for tests to be ran. We're not waiting for development to be done. You know, we're already from design stages, you know, mature enough to build on, you know, the testing, the performance tests, this sort of stuff, and have these environments and other teams connecting to it. So again, we've seen a lot of speed in delivery within the cloud space itself, which in itself is impressive, because like Gene was saying before, you know, you want to be the fastest to the market. You know, when you've got competitors like the smaller banks, like the Monzos and the Starlings of the world like that, you know, the big old legacy banks, they don't want to be left behind. So we need to be fast. We need to be big and fast. So I think that was a good point made.
All right, awesome. Okay, I know there were other questions. I apologize we didn't get to those, but we will try to follow up, you know, after the event as well, potentially with some of you. But again, there's some more sessions here, and so maybe we'll get to some of those questions later. So hey, thank you so much, Kyle. Thank you for spending time with us today, and you're gonna be back soon. So in fact, I don't know if he's just rolling into the next session with Arthur. So thanks, Arthur.
Yeah, okay, great. So you guys can see my slides, right? Yes?
Yes.
No?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So yeah, so we're gonna go into the panel now. So the other panelists, you can turn on your cameras and join us. So we've got Christophe from Proximus, Kyle from Santander, and Joe Colantonio. So rather than do this slide here, I'm going to stop showing the screen, and we'll just let people introduce themselves instead. I think it'll be a little more interesting. So